Welcome to the I Am One podcast, where we chat with Postpartum Support International volunteers to discuss why and how exactly they're supporting the mental health of new families. I'm your host, Danny Giddens. I'm a perinatal mental health certified advocate, a support group leader in my community, and a staff member here at PSI. Hearing one person's story on a podcast changed the trajectory of my life. It was the catalyst to me opening up about my undiagnosed postpartum anxiety, depression, and OCD, processing my own trauma, and realizing that advocacy is my life's work. I'm joined by my co-host, Emily Jankowski-Newton.
It's me. I'm the co-host,
Director of PSI's Climb Out of the Darkness program. We've discovered that there is strength in processing trauma and empowerment in sharing stories.
So that's what we're here to do. Our guests will take us on their journey from pregnancy or adoption through their low on to getting help and finding themselves again. And finally, how they're making a difference today. As I always say, it's the coolest club you didn't want to join, because being a part of PSI means we went through something. And as a result, I've become connected to the coolest, kindest, most fun people that I would have otherwise never had the chance to meet.
One of the most important things that we've learned is that we're not alone. There's something powerful in knowing I am one of many. Whether you're already connected to the perinatal mental health world, looking for ways to support parents and families, or just want to hang out with us in your earbuds, we're so glad you tuned in.
And who knows, maybe we'll hear from you next.
On today's episode, we cozy in for an insightful chat with Shawna Bush, a mother of one, a military spouse, and currently PSI's support coordinator for the U.S. Coast Guard. We'll hear about the intersection of military life and transitioning to parenthood, about the therapeutic effect of animals. Yeah, we talk a lot about animals. And of course, all the incredible work that she's been doing here at PSI to support military families since 2018. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the I Am One podcast are the speaker's own. Tuning into this podcast is not a replacement for therapy or any other form of professional help. Our discussions cover personal stories of perinatal mood and anxiety disorders and may feel triggering to some listeners. Your number one priority is to take care of yourself. So if you are in need of help, please reach out to the PSI Helpline by calling or texting HELP to 1-800-944-4773 for help in English and in Spanish. At PSI, we want you to know you are not alone, you are not to blame, and with help, you will be well. Okay, let's get on with the podcast. Shawna, welcome to the podcast studio. The place where all the magic happens.
We're so happy to have you.
Oh yeah, happy to be here.
I think I just took it somewhere weird from the get-go.
That was really shrill. We are so happy to have you.
I'm very happy to be here.
We just had way too much fun talking about things very off topic, but we'll get into that later. Is this your first time sharing on a podcast, Shawna?
Yes, it is. I'm very excited.
We've had a lot of people sharing for the first time, so that's exciting. We're excited to learn a little bit more about your experience.
I feel like we're witnessing an important milestone for people.
Oh, yeah.
Like sharing the story is a really important part of that journey, and sharing it in a space where it's going to be public or where it's, I feel like I'm witnessing a lot of big moments for people.
Yeah, I'd say at least over half of the people that we've interviewed so far are like, yeah, this is my first time outside of family or some friends or, like other people they volunteer with. So Anyway, we're really thankful that you're here with us and hanging out with us today.
Yeah.
So Shawna, could you give everybody just a little bit of intro to who you are, where you're at? Give us a little intro. Who are you?
My name is Shawna. I am 33 years old. I have a 7-year-old daughter. Her name is Ella. She's lovely. I have a husband who is active duty Coast Guard. He's been in the Coast Guard for about 16 years. He's been in the Coast Guard as long as we've been together. So this is the only man I've never ever known. I've never known him to not be a military man.
Oh, yeah.
So we are living in Plymouth, Massachusetts currently, but we've kind of lived everywhere, up, down, left, and right. We've lived in Seattle, Key West, Florida, Detroit, Jacksonville, Florida, and now we're here in Massachusetts. So if anybody knows anything about that military life, is that you're always moving around.
For sure.
And the shortest stint we've ever done somewhere was about a year. And we were in Detroit for about 3.5 years. So needs of the service, we go where they tell us to. So I also have 2 dogs. I can't believe I almost forgot the dogs.
Don't forget the dogs.
Oh my gosh, Shawna is an animal lover. So I was expecting to hear about animals.
Yes. And I actually might be an outlier here. I actually don't have a job dealing with women, children, or mental health in any capacity, really. I'm in the animal care industry. So I've pretty much done it all. I've been a zookeeper, doggy daycare worker, animal shelter worker, pet sitter, dog walker, and currently I'm a stable hand at a busy equestrian center, boarding, eventing facility here in Massachusetts, and I absolutely love it.
I think there's a big connection, though, between being a health professional and working with animals, because animals are so helpful and healing to be around.
Mm-hmm.
Is it like that for you? Is that your...
Yes.
Yeah.
I've been in this industry, I guess you could call it, for about 11 years, and I can't imagine doing anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Even, I worked with horses a few years back, right before I got pregnant, and it ended up being like one of the greatest jobs I've ever had. And for years, I kept telling myself, I want to get back into working with horses. And this job just kind of fell into my lap, and I'm so glad it did. Horses, I feel like somehow they just understand people. I know I sound like a crazy horse girl, but I don't really care.
Yeah.
Bring it on. If people don't like it, first download the episode and then turn it off.
Because what other person would sit on top of 1,000-pound animal and tell it what to do? So yes,
I would say confident.
yeah, that too.
Yeah.
You're not a real equestrian unless you get tossed a
For
time
sure.
or two. So
Oh,
I've fallen off a time or two. I don't know anyone who can say they haven't been tossed off a horse. So anyways, that's me.
Awesome.
well, thank you. Thanks. I love hearing all of those fun, exciting parts of you, especially, that just, it's interesting that you're not working in the mental health field, and volunteers and advocates don't have to be professionals in the field to be super helpful to new parents and new families. So anyway, we're really glad that you're here. Can you tell us a little bit more about how perinatal mood and anxiety disorders have touched your life specifically?
Yeah. So when I had my daughter about 7 years ago in the hospital, everything's great. The nurses are teaching you how to take care of your baby. My husband was really worried about me having some sort of depression or anxiety, because he knows that his mother went through it when she had both him and his sister. So he actually ended up asking the nurse, how often do you see mothers with postpartum depression, anxiety, anything like that? And the nurse that was helping me out was like, we see a little bit of the baby blues, but it's not really anything all that, it's not a big deal. So I was like, okay, like
that's what you think.
I was like, I'll be all right.
Mm-hmm.
So I bring the baby home, and that's when everything gets very real, very fast. I immediately started struggling with breastfeeding. She was having some problems latching. At the same time, she was not getting enough from me. I was not producing enough. She was getting very frustrated. I was getting very frustrated. I actually was meeting with lactation consultants that were telling me, you got to eat this special oatmeal, you got to do this, and you got to do that. And they were like, you're going to take her to the pediatrician. You're going to weigh her. Then you're going to feed her. And then you're going to weigh her again after you feed her and see how much she got. And they were like, you're going to feed her and you're going to pump. And then you're going to feed her what you just pumped. And then I'm like, well, okay, after I get done feeding her what I just pumped, I got to clean my equipment. And then it's going to be time to feed her again. I was like, when do I sleep?
Great question.
And I think it was probably about 4 weeks after she was born. My husband comes home and I was just sitting on the floor of the nursery, pumping, just sobbing.
Aww.
And he was like, all right, this is not working. I'm not a religious person, but God bless the man, because he immediately went into the cabinet, grabbed the sample box of Enfamil, and gave her a bottle of formula. And we tried our best to not look back. And honestly, switching her over to formula was probably one of the best things I could have done because I was able to sleep a little bit more. Not too much more, but a little bit more. It wasn't like a cure-all, honestly, because my husband got to stay home with me for about 10 days and he had to go back to work. At the time, he was on an ice-breaking tugboat on the Great Lakes. And so he was gone often. Could have been gone for 2-3 days at a time. He could have been gone for a month or two at a time. Like I said, needs of the service. There were times they would call him up and be like, hey, got to go out tomorrow. So I was alone a lot. And when you're a new mother, just trying to figure it all out, in my opinion, being alone is probably the worst thing ever. And when you are a military spouse, your village, quote unquote, might be 5 hours away, might be 2,000 miles away.
Right.
So we as military spouses don't always have that village. I remember calling up there was a postpartum adjustment coordinator that was employed by the hospital I delivered to. Thank goodness for that, because I remember probably about 6 or 7 weeks in, just calling her, just sobbing, like, I don't know what to do. I feel nothing towards my child. I just want to run away.
Yeah.
And I literally just wanted to just leave and never come back. She was telling me about some in-person support groups that the hospital provided, which this was before COVID. So in-person support groups were actually
they were a thing. Once upon a time.
Yeah. And I ended up going to 2 that first week. I went to one on a Monday night and I went to the next one on the next morning.
Oh.
And I honestly feel like those groups helped me so much. Just being around other women who are going through the same thing that I was going through, it helped me not feel so alone.
Oh, I agree.
These were not like military specific. This was just at the hospital. So it was the common ground was just had a baby, having a hard time. Don't feel like myself. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Which I would have loved for it to be military specific. Unfortunately, I don't think PSI's military support group existed at the time.
I don't think
Otherwise,
so.
I would have jumped on that. But, like even going to the meetings, it still wasn't a quick fix. I ended up trying to get an appointment with a psychiatrist, trying to get on some meds. They told me that it would be a 2-month-long waiting list. And so I was like, all right, well, I feel like I need to get started on something. I went to my OB. She got me started on Zoloft. And honestly, I never thought that I would be a person who needed medication to function, but it was a literal lifesaver. And I'm still on it to this day. I was ashamed of it at first, but I am not ashamed anymore. It is obviously it's not a magic pill. It's not a quick fix, but it definitely helps. So long story short, things got better and better. I'm still in therapy. I still have some anxiety issues, but in terms of the diagnosed postpartum depression, I feel like it got a lot better. Right around a year was when I really started to see the light at the end of the tunnel, if you will. So
yeah. So there wasn't just, I like how you've highlighted a number of times that there just wasn't one magical thing that fixed everything for you. It was a combination of, feeling some sort of connection. So, 2 days in a row going to a support group, right? That was a great start, and getting on some kind of medication and being open with your physician to get the help.
I'm picturing building a foundation. Like one block is therapy, one block is medication, one block is peer support. Like one block is when your village is around or when your husband is home. Like these are the things that stabilize.
Yeah. It's not just one thing. You're right. It was a combination of things that I felt really helped.
So was there anything that you found on base to support folks, or not so much? Or
honestly, no. Which looking back, I wish there would have been some more support with the military aspect of it, because amongst the friends that I was making in these support groups, nobody really understood what I was going through. We would get together for play dates and we get the adults together and the kids together. And more often than not, I was the only parent there that didn't have their spouse there with them.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of the parents would come up to me and be like, oh my gosh, I don't know how you do it. And
how does that feel to hear that?
Terrible.
Oh.
Absolutely terrible. And literally the only way I can respond to that statement is I just do it, I just do it. This is the only lifestyle I've known since I've been a mother. So it's just, I just do it. But where we were in Detroit, there wasn't really a very big, close-knit military family, unfortunately. With different branches of the military, depending on where you are stationed, some of the communities are really close-knit. Take Key West, for example. It was a huge hodgepodge of Coast Guard, Navy families. And when you're actually a living member of this 3x5 island, sometimes you get bored. There's not a lot to do. Some people make babies. So we, at that point in our lives, we were not ready to take that step. So I, was around a lot of families that had kids. And from like the outside looking in, that would have been the perfect situation for me after I delivered.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because take some of these Navy wives, for example, their husbands are often gone for months and months and months at a time on these big ships. So you have to rely on that close-knit community just to survive. And unfortunately, where I delivered outside of Detroit, there wasn't really a very close-knit military community. People can hate on Detroit and the Detroit suburbs all they want. They have some amazing hospitals.
I love Detroit, actually.
They have some amazing hospitals, some really good medical care in the suburbs. Mm-hmm. And the hospital I delivered at had some amazing resources. Like if there wasn't a postpartum adjustment coordinator, if it wasn't for those support groups, like I don't know what I would have done. I personally believe that every single hospital should have resources like that because it was a literal lifesaver. Mm-hmm. But, as PSI's military support coordinator, I'm really trying to see if these kinds of resources for military members and their families exist. And unfortunately, they don't.
That was going to be my next question. Like, has it changed at all now that you're helping other families who are where you were 7 years ago? Like, does it look like the landscape is different at all?
A little bit. Yeah. This might be an answer to a question you're going to ask in a few minutes.
Dive in. Let's do it.
But
go ahead. Let's just jump in. Like, tell us what you're doing with PSI. All the amazing things you're doing.
PSI has specialized support coordinators. I am a military support coordinator for the U.S. Coast Guard. Obviously, I'm not a counselor. I'm not a therapist. But if a help seeker were to reach out to me, I could point them in the direction of resources. Most military members have TRICARE for insurance. TRICARE can point you in the direction of some really good resources. However, they will just give you a list of providers that accept the insurance. We don't necessarily know when we're looking at this list if any of these providers are versed in perinatal mood disorders.
Right.
So you might waste hours and hours of your time sitting with a therapist that knows nothing about what you're going through. Like I said, at the time I gave birth, PSI didn't really have any military related resources, but over the years there have been a lot more added. Thank goodness for that. Yeah. So I have seen...
Thanks to you. Like you are part of those resources.
I try. I have seen things going in a very positive direction, but I see some room for some growth. Like I was listening to Talia's episode the other day, and she was talking about the different groups that PSI offers. I sometimes hop on the military support group every once in a while just to check in and see how it's going. When I reached out to Talia, she said that, we're only doing this every other week now because we're only getting like maybe 3 or 4 individuals in these groups.
Yeah.
And she was like, do you know how like we could try to branch out and really advertise these groups? And I was like, let me send a few emails. So
let me talk to a couple people about a couple things. Hold, please.
So the Coast Guard actually has a whole page of like Coast Guard family resources with all these links to all these different organizations. And unfortunately, as I was like poking around the websites to these different organizations, I'd find the search bar and I would just type in postpartum or, perinatal mood disorders or new moms. The amount of results that I was getting was next to nothing.
Wow.
Oh, no.
And I actually there's so many emails I have left to send, but, I'm hoping that we can brainstorm sometime soon to figure out how we can get some advertising out here just to let people know that PSI is offering these resources. Because I know at the time, as a military spouse and new mom, I didn't know where to go.
Yeah.
And I couldn't find people who understood what I was going through. Sure, it's great to find, other new moms who might be struggling, but when your spouse is gone so much, not a lot of non-military families understand what we go through as military spouses,
Yeah.
So like I said, I feel like there's a lot of work that could be done. There's probably hundreds of emails I could send out. This could turn into something very big. I just need to ask myself how much time and energy I'm willing to put for it.
The emails with the
Do not send an email from on top of a horse. I feel like that's probably an ill-advised thing, right? Yeah.
0 stars, would not recommend.
I've answered phone calls from like my daughter's school from on top of the horse. Like, oh,
fine. Actually, you know what?
She's got a 102-degree fever. All right, I'll be right there.
Oh my God.
All right, bud, we got to wrap this up.
If anybody receives an email from Shawna, it may have been sent from atop a horse. Who knows?
I feel like if anyone who works at HRSA is listening, they need to make sure that like the military branches, that like Department of Defense folks know about the maternal mental health hotline, because that's like step one, right? Like if you want to reach someone all day, every day, that's your first stop.
Yeah. And honestly, like when I was first struggling, I knew nothing about PSI. I only learned about PSI when I started joining the support groups. And I know to people who may not be struggling, they might say it's as simple as like a Google search. Like, why don't you just like, I feel really bad around my baby. Like in theory, it sounds like that would be the thing to do.
Let's see what kind of hits we get.
Right.
But when you are a new mom and there's this stigma that you should be able to do it all, you should be able to handle this.
Yes.
Like, it's not our first thought to go jump on Google and ask why the heck I feel like this,
Also, it requires us to have the language to do that Google search. And if you're like, I just don't feel right, I don't feel like myself. I mean, probably now I don't feel like myself might start to generate some things.
That might generate some hits now.
It all depends on like where your head is at and how you can put into words, like, or whether or not you could put into words at all what you're feeling. Yeah.
I think that's a common thing too. Like, what am I feeling?
I've seen things go in a very positive direction, but like I said, I feel like there's a lot of work that still can be done just to spread the word. So
I have a question about, we need to go back in time though. It's not present day question. I was curious about after your daughter was born, how long were you in Detroit after that? And like how long before you felt like maybe you moved and found some community in the on a military base, or have you not found that, or have you found community somewhere else? Or
let's see, that's a good question.
You're going off script. I like it.
That
Danny.
was not on the list. Thanks for rolling. I'm taking some tips from Emily, who is very good at being off script. I'm good at being on script.
The flip side of that is I'm bad at being on script.
And Shawna is great at rolling with it.
She is.
I hate to admit it, but where we are now, it's also not a very close, tight-knit community. I think the last time I really saw a really great village, if you will, it probably would have been Key West. And unfortunately, that was before I had the kid. Honestly, like what I found to be most helpful is, just to really put yourself out there. Like, my husband would be like, oh, we got this new guy just came onto the boat. He's got a wife and some kids. And I often would try to, reach out to these individuals and try to make friends. Unfortunately, with a lot of military families, you have people with all sorts of political views. And unfortunately, when you make friends with someone and you figure out that they don't necessarily have the same views that you do, it is a little disheartening, which, whether you like it or not, politics gets thrown into every single conversation.
Absolutely.
That's related to the Coast Guard or the military.
Well, it affects everything about military life.
So it has been difficult trying to find people who, you can relate to.
Well, the good news is we're best friends now. So
yeah, we're not in the Coast Guard, but
I hate to say it, but like support groups are great in theory, but when you do have some waning interest, or if your advertisement's a little lacking, it is a little disheartening to be the facilitator in a room with only 2 or 3 people. In Jacksonville, for example, I volunteered to be a in-person support group facilitator. I showed up at the location every single week for, I want to say about 6 weeks, and not one person showed up. Geez. So yeah, it can be a little disheartening. And honestly, my involvement with trying to find like-minded friends has ebbed and flowed over the years, depending on what else I have going on in my life.
You know what?
Sometimes
these animals just get me.
Right.
No judgment.
Also, they don't vote, so
I don't know if that answers your question.
That answered.
It is tough too, because what I have found, I don't know if this is related or not, but in the communities that are more spread out, may not have a very close-knit village, a lot of the spouses do work either full-time, part-time. There's not as much time to get together with like-minded individuals. Then again, it depends on where you are, what kind of unit your spouse is stationed at. Take Key West, for example. It's a 3x5 island. There's only so many.
You're all up in each other's business.
Yes. And oh man, join any of those military Key West Facebook groups and you will see all of the drama. You cannot get away from it.
I have a question. As a non-military person, what does 3x5 mean? Does that mean that it's small? Like literally?
3 miles by 5 miles. Yeah.
That's pretty small.
You could.
Is it really 3 miles by 5 miles?
The island of Key West is 3 miles by 5 miles.
I mean, I've been there. I'm ashamed. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And
it's cool.
And honestly, if you're not a tourist and you live there full-time year-round, everyone knows who you are. And it's creepy. I worked at the local animal shelter, and I'd be out on a date with my husband, and the waitress at the Thai restaurant we were at would be like, "Oh my God, are you Shawna?" I'd be like, "Who are you?" I had no idea.
Check, please.
They're like, "My roommate's boyfriend's brother just adopted a dog from you guys." I'm like, "Oh, okay."
And they mentioned my first name? That's weird.
I don't know. Maybe I was a little bit too involved on that island. I don't know. But yeah, so it honestly depends. When you're in such a small area, sometimes you're forced to be very close.
Yeah.
But when you are all more spread out and everyone has jobs, there's less time to try to form these bonds, I guess. Which it all depends.
I think I know the answer to this question. Again, another off-script question. On each space that you've been on, do people just really come and go all the time? I mean, everybody's on a different schedule, right, with their contracts and their assignments. So I'm just thinking of other variables that can affect, the feeling of connection that people might have.
You move there, you make a best friend. That best friend gets redeployed 3 weeks later.
Yeah. it's very hard because you know that creating these relationships is important for your mental health.
Mm-hmm.
However, at the same time, you know that sooner or later, either you're going to move or they're going to move. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
But tricky thing is sometimes you don't know when.
Yeah.
Like I said before, needs of the service. A lot of times you see service members advance and then move on. So like I said, you might be in one place for 1 year. You might be in one place for 3.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
It just depends.
Yeah.
And it is really difficult because you do make these friendships knowing that one of you is going to move sooner or later. And unfortunately, it can be hard to keep in touch with these individuals after the move.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you could say it up and down, like, oh, let's Zoom every week. Let's stay in touch. But sometimes it's not possible.
Yep.
Then you're in different time zones and
yeah,
you've got different things going on. You have no control over your schedule.
I'm making this life seem very depressing, aren't I?
No.
You're highlighting the complexity of it, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Honestly, though, never in a million years would I ever have thought that I'd live in Seattle, Washington, Key West, Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Never would have thought I would have lived outside of Detroit, for gosh sakes.
Yeah, I was going to say, you grew up in the Midwest, right?
Yeah, we're originally from Chicago.
Okay.
And, you know, we moved to Detroit knowing nothing about it. And you still, it's Michigan, it's not Illinois, but you still have, there's that Midwest mentality. Like everyone's so nice. Like we're Midwesterners through and through.
But okay, so you've taken us on your journey from having a baby, feeling not great, the steps that it took and the structure you had to put in place to get better. And now you're talking about all the cool stuff that you do and the resource that you are for other people like you when you didn't have you as a resource, which is like, I think that's why we all volunteer for PSI, right? Is like the opportunity to be what you needed because what you needed didn't exist or because what you needed didn't exist in your neighborhood or whatever, right? I love that.
It is kind of funny how the PSI volunteering kind of fell into my lap because at the point where I was feeling like I was better, when we were living in Jacksonville, I did reach out. I think Carrie was the head of the volunteers at the time.
Coordinator.
Yeah.
And I was like, I want to help out. I don't know what you would have me do, but I'm here. And I started out as a local support coordinator in the Jacksonville area. And then somebody found out that I was military affiliated.
I remember that day.
And almost overnight, I became the military support coordinator for the Coast Guard, Marines, Navy, and Air Force. And I was like, oh my God, what just happened?
And then everybody knew your name. Shawna doesn't only adopt
entire
pets.
Military branches.
So at that point, I did step back with the local support stuff because Jacksonville was pretty well covered.
Yeah. And
luckily, we did get a few more military spouses in there. And now I am just the Coast Guard coordinator. So in the times when I'm not busy, I'm usually on Facebook or Instagram just talking about not only my issues postpartum, but a lot of the same kinds of issues that military spouses who are new moms who might be struggling. You know, what a lot of people don't know is that when a military spouse's significant other is working so much, is deployed, there's a much higher chance that that individual is going to suffer from a PMAD simply because there's less support, I guess, if you want to say, because, you know, your spouse is not always there. So the statistics are much higher amongst families whose spouses are deployed. So most of the time, like I said, when I'm not busy, I'm just trying to spread the word.
So if people are listening, are your socials public or are they private?
They're public. I'm on, it's just me on Facebook, but for Instagram, it's CG postpartum. CG stands for Coast Guard.
Coast Guard postpartum. Yeah. Okay.
I'm not too terribly active on that right now, but I am wanting to become a little bit more active with it. So most of the time on that page, it's just me posting about the different support groups, the different resources that PSI has to offer.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll also drop a link in the show notes to how people can get connected with you if they're in the military and they're looking for resources, specifically Coast Guard families.
I actually, when I was talking to Talia, I was like, I'm not on Twitter, but if we think that it might benefit us, maybe.
Twitter moves so fast.
I've tried to do Twitter a couple times.
Oh, yeah.
Are we old?
Mm-hmm.
Twitter kind of hurts my brain.
Yeah.
Like I was on Twitter a few years back and like just the words and the way it's organized, it just hurts my brain. So I think that's why I never stuck with it. But I'm like, you know what? If it'll help us advertise this group, I will hop onto Twitter. So
we want more people to come to the support groups. So if you are, I would say, current or even former military spouse, right? Because I mean, if you're dealing with TRICARE things as a like retired military family, that's, you know, still stuff worth having peers to talk about. You need to go to the support groups, and then you need to find your branch of the military and find your coordinator.
Yeah.
Good job.
Are we ready for the lightning round?
Yeah.
I think we're ready. Shawna, it sounds like you're ready.
Yes.
That woo. Okay. Do you want to start off, Emily?
I don't know the real questions. You're going to have to start us out.
Oh, geez.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have some other ones though? This might be
a not lightning molasses round.
People are probably so tired of us talking about that. We've got a lot of questions. Okay. So first question, what's your favorite podcast?
Other than this one, obvi.
You don't have to say this one. We understand.
I'm a big fan of Stuff You Should Know.
Yeah. I love that.
Is that like a nerdy one?
You
Does it
haven't
tell
heard
you
of that,
nerdy
Eve?
stuff?
You've never heard of
Oh, okay. I'm writing that down.
It's good. Yeah. It's good.
Well, so do you remember the website How Stuff Works?
Yes.
It's the podcast based off of How Stuff Works. And it's two guys who just sit there and they just teach you about stuff.
It's really cool.
They are really good friends and they have they mesh so well. And you sit there and you listen to this podcast and you feel like you're sitting with friends.
I love that.
So Stuff You Should Know. It's great.
Nice. Do you like a book in your hand or a book in your ear?
Hand.
Another analog.
You know what? I have to say, I am so surprised. We have had a number of people they're just like, I want a book. I want to hold on to this book. Okay,
Yep.
Cool.
It's just, I don't know. There's something about the feeling of turning a page.
I'm going to give you my hot parenting tip though, because audiobooks are great with kids. Like kid audiobooks, Big Friendly Giant, like that kind of thing. So much fun to listen to if you're ever like on a road trip or whatever. I love that because it's like a family activity, but I don't have to do all the reading.
Yeah. I tried to play a children's podcast for my daughter once in the car. She wanted nothing to do with it. I was like,
okay. Womp womp.
Yeah. It's like, you're no fun.
Jeez.
Well, what are you Are you reading anything at the moment that you could recommend? It's
so
also
nerdy.
okay. Yes. Bring it on.
Right now, I'm reading a nonfiction book entitled Raising Goats Naturally.
Yes.
Cool. Well, for everybody who sees your episode thumbnail, it's going to be on brand, and they're going to want to know that they're going to want that link.
So I started listening to this podcast about 2 years ago. It's called For the Love of Goats. And I was introduced to this woman named Deborah Neiman, who actually lives in central Illinois. And through this podcast, she started educating me about goats. I've always wanted goats. Me and my husband plan to have our own little homestead someday. We want goats and chickens. And I'm starting my education now. So this Deborah Neiman, she actually has several books that she has written, and I am currently reading one entitled Raising Goats Naturally.
Nice.
And this woman is like my goat idol. Like, I have a goat idol.
That's cool.
Yeah, that seems totally reasonable to me.
Honestly, when we buy our first goats, I hope she's still breeding goats because I want to buy some of her goats. And I want her to be my mentor. And I want to be able to call her up if I'm having any issues with my goats. Yeah, so that's how nerdy I am.
We need to get a goat sponsor for Shawna.
Follow-up question.
If anybody wants to donate a goat to Shawna in the future, let us know.
Murray McMurray Hatchery, if you're listening, she also likes chickens. You could totally sponsor this episode. That's where I get my chickens from. Sometimes I get them from all over the place, actually.
Do you fly your chicken?
They mail them, which is not uncommon at my post office. It's like a box that's cheaping. Mm-hmm. Not weird.
Yep.
Not weird where I live.
I did not know that was a thing.
Oh, it's a thing.
The last job that I had was at a farm, and we would raise Thanksgiving turkeys. And it was my job when the turkeys came in. My job was to pick the baby turkeys up from the post office. I walk into the post office, and all I hear is beep, beep, beep.
Mm-hmm.
And
they're like, thank God Shawna's here. Shawna, yes, you saved us.
Can I help you? I'm like, I'm here for the poultry. He's like, oh, thank God. He's like, they're really starting to annoy me. I'm like, okay. Hey, guess who gets to be the one to raise them to like 40 to 50 pounds?
Oh,
this girl right here.
That's a lot.
Wow.
What a lot of people don't know is that turkeys will eat whatever you feed them.
Yep.
Really?
And when you want to raise Thanksgiving turkeys that aren't 40 to 50 pounds, you have to feed them less. And they get aggressive when they are hungry.
Hangry turkeys.
That is one animal I will never own. I will never own turkeys. I just can't.
They're nasty.
Okay, I got to cross turkeys off my list. If Shawna doesn't recommend them, then so my follow-up lightning round question, which is not lightning round at all. Again,
it's molasses. We've covered that.
Yes. Do you have a favorite homesteading podcast, homesteading YouTube channel?
Shawna's got like stars in her eyes. She looks like she might have. Do you?
Maybe not YouTube channel, but I do follow some people on TikTok.
Tell me more.
I don't know if you've heard of. I forgot what her name is or what her username is, but it's the chick who has like 4 alpacas, and then there's the alpaca named Michael who just like.
I'm just gonna Google Michael the alpaca. I bet it'll come up.
Do it.
And basically like Michael just always looks like he has nothing in his brain, and I do follow her because, she has 2 emus, alpacas, she got a donkey, some horses. I wish I could remember the
Emily,
name.
look it up.
My local like Facebook homesteading group, they just posted a bunch of people have like heifers for sale. And I'm like, don't do it. You don't even have a fence. Don't do it. But I'm like, I'm really thinking about it. They're not even dairy heifers.
Yeah.
Useless farm.
I am a member
Useless farm.
Useless farm. Yes, that's it. Oh,
Michael the alpaca on Useless Farm. Yes. Find him on TikTok. Okay.
And I'm a member of like a Massachusetts backyard chicken owners group.
Yeah. Maryland Backyard Chickens is the bomb.
Homesteaders of New England I'm a part of. I'm a part of several goat groups, which people are like selling their prize winning milking goats on these like pages. And I'm like,
I'm not paying that much for a goat.
the goats aren't that expensive. Yeah. It depends on where you're buying your goat, I guess. Yeah. So that's kind of my TikTok is kind of my escape because my algorithm went in a very interesting direction. It's all like horses, goats, and chickens.
Well, may I recommend to you Save a Fox on TikTok?
Ooh.
It's a fox rescue sanctuary. They also have like minks and like wolves, and they make the cutest sounds. And like you cannot domesticate foxes, like you can't. But there are lots of foxes that live in where I live. So I was dropping my kid off at school this morning and I saw one like running. And we were almost late to school because we stopped and just watched the fox like run because they're so pretty.
Mm-hmm. I actually do follow. There's a TikTok page called Arctic Fox Daily, and this chick runs a fox like rescue, and she loves posting the videos of the foxes making all their silly noises.
Yes.
I think this is answering one of our one of our frequently asked lightning round questions, which is what's your go-to for a quick mental break? Sounds like looking at animals on TikTok is your jam.
Yeah.
Actually, in addition to that, I recently found an app that I had never heard of before. It's called Mix.
Okay.
And it is a more wholesome, if you will, version of TikTok where you just input like some things that you like, whether it be like photography, nature, traveling, and you just scroll, and it's a lot of like travel videos, nature photography, waterfalls, mountains, and it's like the most relaxing thing ever, honestly.
Mix. Okay.
And you could just scroll. And do you remember Stumble Upon?
Yeah.
Do you remember what that was, where you literally like
it was like a feed from other feeds, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you can like thumbs up or thumbs down. I want to see more of this. I want to see less of this. And depending on whether you thumbs up or thumbs down, it'll feed you content. And in my opinion, it's a lot less political, a lot less dramatic. It's a lot more wholesome than TikTok.
Okay. Cool.
So, Mix, MIX.
Nice.
Do we have any more in your queue? Because I have one more.
Oh, well, go ahead.
Okay. What's your favorite board game to play with a group of people? Have you ever played Agricola?
No.
Okay, it's a board game about homesteading.
Oh,
really?
Yeah.
Hot tip from Emily in the molasses round.
Yeah, Agricola, great. Also, the other game that you were talking about, it's like where there's like good guys and bad guys, and like each person is assigned a character, but like you don't know who's who, and everyone like is allowed to say only certain things and not other things, right? So there are two other versions of that I play often. One is called Coup, and then the other one is called One Night Midnight Werewolf. One person or more is the werewolf. Like people are villagers, like the barman. Sometimes there's a wizard. It's like you're only allowed to do what's on your card, and everyone's like, I don't know. It wasn't me. I didn't bite the guy. Like, but everyone's trying to figure out like, and so you're like, do I trust the people that I'm playing this game with? It's a very reading people focused game. Danny would win. Probably Shawna would too. I always lose.
Honestly, those games where you have to like not give it away, like what your character is, I'm terrible at it, but I'm so bad at it that it's to the point where everyone's like, she's so obvious. It's no
clearly
way.
Shawna.
And then I win.
Okay, I see.
I love it.
Shawna, do you have a particularly favorite military family resource that you like to share with folks? Now, I know this is not about board games or animals, so I'm going like off topic here.
It's okay. You're bringing us back. You're bringing us back.
Like I have said before, I feel like there should be a lot more out there.
Yeah.
And this might be a little biased, but I feel like PSI's resources are pretty spot on. The military support group, I hope it's going to be bigger in the future. I know I'm going to try very hard to get some advertising out there, and hopefully we can do a little brainstorming and get it bigger than what it is right now. But even connecting the help seeker with these military coordinators is huge as well. So, I mean, honestly, I can't think of any others, which is really sad. I think there really should be more resources out there.
Well, we'll start here. So, Shawna, I think our last question of the day, Emily, if unless you have anything else.
Please.
Our last question is, how are you going to show yourself some radical love today?
Ooh. Okay, so recently, about like a year or so ago, I started to get really into skincare. And so nowadays, I really love that time of day when I can just kind of like pamper myself. Before then, it'd be like a quick wash my face, throw some lotion on, done. But nowadays, I actually like take the time to like take care of myself. And it's some of my favorite parts of my day. So
taking a little time to do something just for you. That does feel nice, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I'm impressed you use lotion. That's a step I don't. I'm like, is my face clean? Clean it off. It's fine. Shawna, I have had so much fun talking about goats and talking about board games and also talking about your experience with PMADS and what you're doing now in your greater community of all of the Coast Guard to make a difference. So thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you for
on the
being
pod.
here, Shawna.
You're welcome. It's been fun.
Thanks for tuning in to the I Am One podcast. Check out today's show notes where we'll drop links to all the important things that we mentioned in this episode. Please consider sharing about our show on social media and following and rating our show wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. It only takes a minute of your time and, well, that'll help with our collective mission of bringing resources and local support to folks worldwide. From everyone here at PSI, thanks again for listening.